Franklin Gimbel, thank you for doing this. I'm Roger Orloff. This is going to be part of a archive that we're building of a living history of men who brought honor to Pi Lambda Phi, both in building it and in their work in their communities. I do have some prepared questions, but I hope this can be a conversation, not a cross-examination. And in the interest of that, if you want to digress, go do it. And if there's a question that you don't think is worth the time, just let me know and we'll skip on to the next one. That sound like a plan?
Great plan. I'll never insult your question, though.
It's
not my style.
This may come out of left field, but I'd like to start by asking you to read the creed of Pi Lambda Phi out loud.
Our creed, that all men are created free and equal, that no society of men can flourish unless members of that society are endowed with the opportunities and privileges of freedom. That freedom implies the elimination of prejudice, that the elimination of prejudice means a better understanding twixt men, that it is incumbent upon me to fight for such freedom, even with my life. This is incumbent upon me. It is my personal life to be devoted to the highest standards of honesty and justice. That because my country is dedicated to the highest standards of freedom and justice for all men of all creeds. I hereby pledge allegiance to my country and to its national symbol.
Anything in that have particular meaning to you?
All of it. I was born in the 1930s. I experienced bigotry as a kid, going to school in a blue-collar neighborhood during World War II. As a member of the Jewish faith, there were many people in my neighborhood who were proponents, if not supporters, of Adolf Hitler. And so I had many an occasion to duke it out on a street corner as a Jew with people who were anti-Semitic. That was one thing. When I was in high school, a group of my friends, many of them who became Pi Lambs, and I took a bus trip down to Miami Beach. And I don't know if you've ever taken a bus trip for any length of time, but this was during the days of segregation. And I remember one instance in particular. They had the colored bathrooms, the colored drinking fountains, we call them bubblers here. And the bus driver stopped us. I think there were 6 of us in the bus, nobody else in the bus. And he said, "Boys, you're gonna have to move up front right now because I want to let these niggers on the bus." We were quite liberal young men. This was when we were 17 years old. He said, "We don't have a problem. Let them on. They don't sit anyplace." No, you don't understand. If you ain't going to move up front, they're going to stay on the side of the road. That's just the way it is. We moved up front. So response to your question, Roger, is that I saw some firsthand pretty ugly situations in this country where bigotry and prejudice were not concealed, not hidden in fancy speech, but on the street in a gruesome kind of a way when you add what you hope is the general tone of civility and morality that we're supposed to live with.
How did your experience in Pi Lambda Phi affect your views on that?
Well, I think you have to start with the notion that the Omega chapter in Madison has always had a history of liberality. In fact, in 1962, I ran for the state assembly. I had graduated law school 2 years earlier. And the person I ran against was an employee of the Allen Bradley Company. The owners of the Allen Bradley Company at the time were pretty conservative folks. And he proposed in the 1960s that the legislature pass a bill that would essentially screen any East Coast Jews from coming to Wisconsin because we know they're all communists. So that was kind of an inspiration to run. Thank God I lost that election because my life wouldn't have been as good or the same. And Pi Lam was emblematic of the liberality of Madison. And it was because while the guys in the fraternity came from all different economic strata, I worked a meal job for 4 years at college in Madison. Some didn't. I never had my own car, some did. We all had something in common, and that is that we were pledged to make life better for the people that didn't have what we had, and to support any kind of civil libertarian agendas that were being practiced by the school and being practiced by the politics of Madison. And the politics of Madison have grown in that direction even today, where it's hard for a Republican to get any votes. But the fact of the matter is that we took in the first African-American member during the time that I was in Pi Lambda in Madison. He was an extraordinary person. He became the superintendent of schools in Evanston, Illinois. He was a champion football player on the Badger team. And most importantly, he was a gentleman and a scholar. And I don't view that as being anything but a reflection of the fact that we had a soul in the Pi Lambda chapter in Madison. And our soul was that we're here to do good. And I think we practice that on a regular basis.
Bud spoke about that one.
Sorry, real quick. Sorry, I got your chair. Are you able to just lean back a little bit? Sorry, I put your chair kind of.
No, where you want me to go?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you just lean back. Yeah.
Okay. Can I cross my leg?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
Bud spoke about that when we interviewed him for the national publication a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You've spent your career as a litigator. Have you had any opportunity to advance those views professionally?
Well, I was the president of the State Bar of Wisconsin. That's a mandatory bar. There are 23,000 practicing lawyers in Wisconsin. They don't all live here, but they have license here. I was the president of Downtown Rotary. I was on the Fire and Police Commission in Milwaukee at a time when the Justice Department brought a lawsuit against Milwaukee for discrimination in hiring and promoting minorities. And we had a German chief of police called Harold Breyer, and he didn't want anybody to tell him how he should run his police department. The lawsuit was resolved with a consent decree, which meant that the city agreed that there were these unfortunate practices in the police and fire hiring and promotion, particularly the police. And so I duked it out with Chief Breyer. This was after I spent 5 years as Assistant United States Attorney in Milwaukee. And in other situations, I encouraged, when I was president of Downtown Rotary, I encouraged a substantial recruitment of women and minorities to be brought in, rather than just white businessmen.
Well, I've gotten a little ahead of myself chronologically, but I couldn't resist following up on some of the things you said. Let me, if I can, go back to the beginning. Can I ask you to introduce yourself, your name, chapter, when you were initiated, when you graduated?
Sure. My formal name is Franklin Gimbel. I graduated from high school in the spring of 1954 and started in Madison in the fall of that year. I was rushed for various fraternities in the late fall of 1954, and I selected and was initiated into the Omega chapter in Madison in 1955. And needless to say, I continued my membership there through my college days in Madison. I graduated from Madison in 1958. Went on to college in Milwaukee to law school at Marquette. But the fraternity was, as I said, it was predominantly white Jewish boys from Chicago, New York, and a few sprinkles from here, there, and other places.
Why did you pick Phi Lambda?
Well, I found that they had the right priorities. And it was my view that their priorities were to take kids that their folks sent to get a college education and let them know that during your 4 years or whatever number of years you spent in this particular segment of your life in college, and get smart, go to school, excel. They also had like a company mantra, if you will. They wanted to be recognized as a group of people at the highest grade point of any fraternity in Madison. They wanted to be able to duke it out with other fraternities in sports, and we did, and very effectively. We were involved in campus variety shows, campus politics. There was an event called Humorology. I may address that tonight in my remarks. And we had guys that could write Broadway-style musicals, and our guys could perform, and we paired up with sororities, and we'd always take home the gold cup. So they had a winner's mentality, and the contests were for the right things.
Two men who will shortly become your fellow Big Pies were Rogers and Hammerstein.
I believe that, yeah.
What roles did he play in the chapter?
Well, I don't recall any particular role. I think I might have been vice president, but I was one of the members of the fraternity that was involved in campus activities. So I was a chairman of the humorology publicity for the whole college. I was the chairman of the homecoming social events. I was the Toastmaster for the homecoming show in the field house, where the performers were Pat Boone and a number of up-and-coming performers. In fact, he came to my house on his way from the East Coast to California, and he was on his way for a screen test. His song, Friendly Persuasion, was in a Gary Cooper movie. At the time, some of you don't remember this, you're all too young. But in any event, he was a fun-loving kid. I ran for some campus office, and needless to say, I was a mentor to some of the younger guys who wanted to stretch themselves out and get involved in campus activities away from the fraternity house. But I was a tailback on the football team. In fact, Al Lerner, the McDonald's guy, he's going to be here tonight. He'll tell you that he was really the tailback, and he was better than me, but I wasn't that bad.
The game changed a bit since then?
Yeah, I thought I can't throw passes anymore.
Do you have a couple of particularly strong memories from your days in the chapter that you'd like to share?
Well, it's curious looking back, as is the case in any experience that we have in life. Things that don't seem to be extraordinarily relevant at the moment become more relevant as time goes by. For example, my pledge father was Bud Selig. Now, I knew Buddy in Milwaukee, and we were friends, but he went to a different high school, a different part of town, and he was a geek. He was a guy that kept a scorecard when he listened to a baseball game on the radio. There wasn't much television in those days. He was a sports nerd. Even today, I won't say that in front of him because he'll get mad at me. If he ever gets to throw the opening pitch in, he's got to move up. I've thrown in the opening pitch at the stadium a couple times. I get it over the plate. But who would ever think that what this guy did to enlarge the game, there's no precedent for it. And he's got an international reputation. And he's done extraordinary philanthropic things, he and his wife. And his wife and I went to the same grade school and high school. We were on the east side, and he was on the west side. And Herb Cole, who I have a picture in my office of a Sweet 16 party that he was at with a person who became part of an extended family. And everybody thought he was kind of a mild-mannered guy with a dad who had a very successful business. But he became extraordinarily Powerful. United States Senator, owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, which he bought for $16 million,
So for 500.
$450 million, and gave back $100 million to throw into the new stadium. Steve Marcus, he had a girlfriend that lived on another campus, and I was the guy who was supposed to collect the long distance tolls. So I'd knock on his door every month and say, you owe us $30 for your long distance calls. I mean, $30 is more than I got as an allowance. But those guys and I, we bonded, and we've gone down the road together in a lot of different ways.
You and Bud and Herb and Steve have known one another just about your entire lives.
Correct.
How did those relationships form, and how have they evolved?
Well, I didn't know Steve Marcus until I went to college, because he didn't live in Milwaukee. At the time, I think he lived in Minneapolis and in Ripon and Oshkosh. Excuse me. Yes, I knew Herbie. I knew Buddy. We socialized together in high school, not on a weekly basis. But we all had this extracurricular interest in politics and in community. And we all expressed it in different ways. Bud became an owner of a baseball team, really saved baseball for Milwaukee. He's a legend as far as baseball being in Milwaukee is concerned. Steve became the emperor of hospitality, restaurants, hotels, and Herbie just moved into office, ran for office, was successful, and he's not an open, aggressive guy, he's a shy guy, but he had enough money to run without raising money. Well, that's a good thing. Well educated, and he and his family figured out when to sell businesses, which a lot of people don't. So we collided, and I say that figuratively, not literally, because I got involved in a lot of hospitality stuff. I was appointed by a Republican governor to be on the Convention Center District Board. Before they built the Convention Center here, I served as its chairperson for 20 years. And under my leadership, we built the Convention Center. We remodeled the auditorium into a theater. We remodeled an arena that was once the home of Marquette basketball, the Bucks, after they got a new facility. And we crossed paths many, many times with those roles. We also, in the Convention Center District, used as our source of funding 3 taxes that are related to, well, at least to Buddy and to Steve. We collected a tax on hotel rooms in Milwaukee, and when they were building a new baseball stadium in Milwaukee, they wanted that, it was gone. We collected a tax on food and beverage. When they were building a new baseball stadium, they wanted that, it was gone. We collected a tax on auto rentals. When the baseball people wanted that for their new stadium, it was gone. So I mean, it wasn't like it was personalized. I'm the bad guy, or they're the bad guys. We just interacted on a number of different stages where we had essentially a commonality of interest, and the commonality of interest was A, to provide Milwaukee big league status as a venue to come to. And certainly Bud and Herb did that with their sports. Steve did that with his restaurants and his hotels. And I guess I did it with my little side freebie job of building a convention center, pounding the sands for people to build more hotel rooms so that it would be able to accommodate groups of larger sizes that would want to come to Milwaukee, because there was a sizzle in Milwaukee, and that sizzle continues today more so than ever. Different than Cleveland.
Certainly when I was there in the 60s.
Yeah, Cleveland's coming back too.
Yeah, I've been quite struck with
Yeah.
how much has changed since then.
Sure.
And again, a big part of that has been that the business community has finally gotten involved
Sure.
with it again.
Sure.
What have you enjoyed most about being a Phi Lambda?
Well, I think it's the people that I met in that compartment of my life. I've made lifelong friends across the board. And when I say lifelong friends, one thing that I think people should consider when they use the word friend, and that is for someone to be your friend, that person doesn't have to be a person with whom you have contact every day. You don't have to talk to them on the phone every day. You don't have to see them every day. You can see them once a year. You can see them once every 20 years. But if there's some bond that brought you together at one point in time or another in your life, it seems to me that those friendships are solid and enduring. And when they have sadness occur in their families, you want to be there at their side to console them. When they have happy events, you want to be there to help celebrate their happy events. And I can say, as I'm sitting here today in this conversation, that I have seen my fraternity brothers prosper and succeed, and I've seen some that went in a different direction. My brother passed away when he was 58 years old. He had health issues. Another one of our fraternity brothers, one of them, handsome, popular guy, got in over his head with gambling, committed suicide. And people had ugly divorces. They had business reverses. And so I think that my days at Pi Lambda, when I was starting to really get into what is maturity about, was at the same time that I created these friendships, and they've been long-lasting. And the principles that abided those friendships were the principles, in my view, of what Pi Lambda stood for.
Were there challenges in your undergraduate days or afterward that Phi Lambda was particularly helpful to you in dealing with?
Not as an institution, but I have to say that my brothers, from time to time and on a regular basis, were there for me when the clouds were over the sun and when it was raining, and we stood side by side during those days. And then we also shared events in our lives, respective lives, that were good events. So I think there's a word collegiality, there's a word fraternity, and I think those terms commingle when you're a college person. And I think that I'm a better person today at age 83 than I was at age 18 when I entered the doors of the Pi Lambda house for my first rushing experience. And I credit the soul of the fraternity for contributing that to me and to those buddies of mine. I've got friends, for example, that went to different fraternities. And they even say to me now, that was one of the biggest mistakes I made. I didn't go to Pi Lambda. And I got one guy in mind right now. I won't mention his name. But he says, that was a big mistake. I said, yeah, for sure. What's your next point?
Since you brought up that subject, I think you told Ian Lowe that you're going to have a number of guests at the dinner tonight who aren't Phi Lambda.
Yep.
And that after they hear your speech, all of them are going to want to belong. What is there about Pi Lambda Phi that you believe everyone should want to belong to it?
Well, the Pi Lambda that I became a member of had their priorities in the right order. And that's a very broad-based comment. But what I mean by it is that a lot of college kids that get emancipated from home, they don't have a mother or father or anybody else looking over their shoulder to see what they're doing. And a lot of kids go to college, they learn how to drink, they don't know how to control their drinking. They start to ignore the responsibilities associated with working, and in the context of a college education, working is studying, going to classes, being religious about maintaining your obligations on the schedule. And Pi Lambda always fostered that kind of lifestyle. And I think it assisted me. I had parents who were not college-educated people. Their siblings were. But to them, it was extraordinarily important that my brother and I both get a college degree and a professional college degree. And so we were steered in that direction. And I say that Pi Lambda stood in line with my parents as having a very substantial influence on me in order to reach out and try to do good stuff.
If you could advise a 19-year-old Frank Gimbel today, what would you say to him?
I'd say set up a laundry list of objectives of what you want to do in respect to your going to college. And I might fish out from them their instinctive list of things to do at the starting point. But I would want them to have on that starting point what I've told a lot of young African American kids that I've represented on public defender appointments when I started practicing law 50 plus years ago. And that is, you can get a job tomorrow. You can become a manager if you have two things. One, you need an alarm clock. You must be on time. If you're not on time, you can't keep a job. And that applies wherever you go. And the other thing is you have to have a bath or a shower. Got to be clean. And I tell a kid going to college, you get an alarm clock and you have a shower and you show up at the right time for your classes. If you've got commitments that are generated by the instructors, professors, you go and you see to it that those obligations are fulfilled. And always be clean in your dealings. And do unto others, that's the golden rule, do unto others as you expect them to do to you. And you'd hope and pray that, that they'd listen to you. I was meeting with a group of, I'd say, mid-level African-American managers in Milwaukee, and I was invited to talk about my experiences, Fire and Police Commission, and some of the other things I did that race relations was involved with. And I said, I want to ask you, if you get in your Mercedes right now, and you drive into the hood, and you see three kids and they're 13, 14, 15 years old, and they're just hanging around, should be in school. They should be doing something other than what they're doing. What do you think would happen if you stopped the car there, and you invite them to come over and have a conversation with you, and say, you see this car? I used to stand on the street corner just like you did. And I'll tell you what, if I continue to, you know where I'd be today? I'd be in prison. But I didn't. I went to school, and I got a job, and I showed up on time for everything that I did. They said to me, you can probably do it better than we do. If we said, they'll break our windows and slash our tires. That was a disappointing answer. But that is really, life is driven by adherence to fundamentals. And the fundamentals are pay attention to your surroundings and take what life gives you in the way of learning, give back in a way of service, and you'll have a successful life.
I understand you crossed paths with Lyndon Johnson when you chaired the Jefferson-Jackson Day Dinner in 1963. What was that experience like?
It was one of my Reader's Digest memories, okay? And the situation gave rise to my really being the lawyer I turned out to be, a pretty prominent lawyer. I was asked by the state Democratic chairman, Patrick Lucy, to have lunch with him at the Schrader Hotel. It's now the Hilton Marcus Hotel. Now, it wasn't at the time. And this was in 1963. And he said, Frank, you've just helped us raise some money for the Milwaukee County Democrats. I want you to be the chairman of this JJ dinner at the arena. We're having Lyndon Johnson here in June, and we're going to sell it out for $100 a ticket, which is a lot of money in those days. And then I want you to be the Toastmaster. And I said, Pat, I'm honored by your request, But I says, I got 2 babies at home. I said, I'm working at a job. I got to go out and work menial jobs after my practice law. I'm not making a living. You get me a job in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Milwaukee. I'll do anything. I'll wash your car. I'll do your job, your dinner, what have you. So he calls over the maitre d'. The maitre d', he says, bring me a telephone. He goes, boom, boom, boom. He calls up. He says, hey, Bobby, it's Pat. Yeah, how's Jack? Great, glad to hear it. Hey, listen, Bobby, I hate to bother you, but I got this bright young kid here, and he's done a lot of favors for me and for the party, and he'd like to get a job in the U.S. Attorney's. Can you accommodate him? Oh, yeah? All right, what should he do? Oh, thanks, Bobby, you're the best. It was Bobby Kennedy. And the next day I got a call from the U.S. Attorney, a guy named Jim Brennan, and he said, I got a call from the Attorney General. He says, I should offer you a job. You got a job offer. I did the Lyndon Johnson thing, sold out the event. And this is one of those curious situations where, you know, trial lawyers have to know how to bullshit in a second. We had this long, well, first, he's invited to a luncheon at the Schrader Hotel by the chairman of Schlitz Brewing Company and the chairman of Al Sharman. I'm just a fly on the wall. I'm sitting in the corner. And he sits there and he says, okay, Roger, now, what do you do for a living? He said, well, I'm the chairman of the Joseph Schlitz Brewing Company. Really? I heard about that beer. Let me ask the rest of you guys here. How many of you bought a case of Schlitz beer in the last year? None. Then he went around the whole room like this. About 15 guys. And he said, you know what your problem is, you Republicans here? Your problem is that you're so interested in increasing the bottom line by what you don't spend that you miss that you're not encouraging people who are your consumers to have the ability to buy your product. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is him talking to this group. He said, if you give your folks that work on the line at the Schlitz Brewing Company, you know, a 50-cent an hour raise, and if I bring 15 of them in here today, tomorrow, or after they get their raise, and I say, how many of you bought a case of Schlitz beer in the last year? Every one of them would have their arms raised. And then if I said, how many of you bought 2 cases? They'd all still have their arms raised. But you guys just missed the point. And I said to people afterwards that this guy at that table, he would have got 50% of the votes running against Jesus Christ. I mean, that's how these guys got the message, okay? And then I'm the Toastmaster at the dinner, and we got the mayor there, we got senators there, and he's going to walk in at 9 o'clock, okay? So I'm running the show, and it's getting to be like 8:45. I figure this is terrific. And I got one more guy, and this guy comes up and he says, you Mr. Gimbel? Yes, sir. My name is, you know, Joe O'Reilly. I'm with the Secret Service, the detail, the vice president. He's running a little late. He's going to be about a half hour late. So I had to kill 30 minutes time up there. And we kind of got the audience participation and what have you. Because if I didn't, they'd all left. And he'd have come in and he would talk to empty chairs. So it was an interesting first challenge to extemporaneous speaking opportunities.
Did you get to spend any time with Bobby Kennedy?
I met Bobby Kennedy twice and never spent any time with him. I mean, it was hello, goodbye. I met Jack Kennedy, and that was an interesting experience because he had an aura about it. I spent more time with Barack Obama, a couple of 2 or 3 times, and he was a very charming guy. Is a charming guy. I also met the 2 President Bushes. I met Bill Clinton in the White House. One of my sons was in corporate affairs for Miller Brewing Company, and we were in the garden, and we met him, and he was a colorful guy.
I understand that one of the mantras of your family is you can't sit back and wait for life to come to you. You have to go into the teeth of life, and if you're going to achieve anything, you have to be aggressive. Can you talk some more about that?
Well, it's a little bit like the 3 black kids standing on the street corner, having 0 self-confidence, having zero role models to give them some direction as to how they can be other than somebody who's going to wind up in jail. And if you imbue them with the notion that work is not a sign of weakness and menial work is an opportunity to advance, we'd be better off, we'd have less people in jail. My successes in life, I think, have come predominantly as a consequence of not saying no when I was offered opportunities to help out one cause or another, one a type of leadership role is against another, and I know people have extraordinary talents and what have you, and they just refuse to do other than to stay home and go to work and bring home their thing, and then they might play golf or they might do this or the other thing as their one way to entertain themselves. But I have gotten more satisfaction out of community service than the community got out of me being there, in my opinion. And there are rewards, but you don't shoot for the rewards. You shoot for the opportunity for the service, the rewards come.
You led the prosecution that put away Frank Gimbel. What was that experience like?
I was prosecuting a case that was investigated by the Intelligence Division of the Internal Revenue Service. And so we urged the judge to allow us to demonstrate that while the FBI had engaged in inappropriate behavior that would and could give rise to suppression of the evidence because it was obtained illegally, we didn't have an FBI case, and I would demonstrate to his satisfaction that our evidence all came from legitimate investigative sources. And so we had this hearing for multiple weeks, and the judge reached that conclusion. There was one count that he threw out because it was about Balistreri's game plan to create a method to sidestep tax obligations. But the substantive tax cases went to trial and he was convicted.
And you tried a case before the U.S. Supreme Court and you won it.
Yes.
How was that?
Well, we represented this guy who worked for the Small Business Administration. And he had one of his clients. He was an African-American officer of the Small Business Administration. He had a pal who was one of his clients with the SBA, who was performing the manufacture of knit goods for the Navy. And while the guy's assignment, my guy's assignment, changed and he'd have supervision, they were pals. And at one time or another, the pal, not the government employee, was looking for a loan. And my guy says, no, I don't have any money. I want a loan from you. And what happened is that he fell behind, meaning the guy manufacturing the knit goods for the Navy. The Navy starts dunning him and says, we're gonna disenfranchise you. We're going to cut off your ability to do business with the government because you're not performing. And he said, well, I'm not performing because one of your guys is trying to hold me up for some money. So they brought the FBI in, and they wired up the guy, and they're sitting in this hotel, right downstairs in the lobby. And guys, the setup guy says to my guy, you know, I called you here because I was going through my basement, you know. My wife and I are moving, and we're looking at what we can throw out before we call the moving truck and what have you, and I found some money that I forgot that I had, $15,000. Are you still interested in borrowing that? Yeah, sure, that'd be great for me. Okay, fine. What do you want me to do? Well, I want you to do it here. Gives him an envelope, okay? Takes the envelope, there you go. FBI jumps in, they put the handcuffs on right downstairs here in a coffee shop. March him out and charge him with soliciting a bribe. So we tried the case, and we attempted to have the court give an entrapment instruction to the jury. The judge says, I'm only going to give an entrapment instruction to the jury if you admit to the crime. Say that, yes, I was looking for a bribe, but they set the table for me and made me do it. My guy wouldn't do that. He said, no, I wasn't really looking, I was looking for a loan. So he denied it. Went to the Court of Appeals, he got convicted. He got sentenced to 1 year home detention, which is a pretty soft landing. Went to Chicago, the Court of Appeals, and they affirmed, they found that it was no big deal not to let the jury consider the entrapment. What happens next is that I file a motion with the Supreme Court in form of pauperous. He's got no money left. We took all his money, and not that much. They grant certiorari on this entrapment issue, and they appoint me as his lawyer. And so we go out to Washington. And that was the day, my first appearance in the Supreme Court, that there was a case that was being decided by the Supreme Court between Jerry Falwell, the evangelical preacher, and Larry Flint, the publisher of Hustler magazine, about some cartoon that they had in there. And the courtroom was jammed with people. And Falwell's sitting there in the front row with kind of angelic view of life. And he's got this very stiff-shirted lawyer from New York. Good morning, Mr. Chief Justice and members of the court. My name is Norman Crepland, and I represent the Reverend Jerry Falwell, you know. And so he starts his argument, and the Supreme Court beats the crap out of him. And I loved it. And then Flint's lawyer is a little guy with a beard, and he's got a tweed suit on, and nobody picks on him at all. He makes his argument. And they said, thank you, we'll take the case under advisement. Everybody's leaving the courtroom. And I get up and I say, Mr. Chief Justice, may it please the court, my name is Frank Gimbel. Sit down, Mr. Gimbel. Let things settle down. And then I said to the chief, I said, I thought they were here for me, of course being facetious. And he chuckled. And then I got up and argued the case. And at the end of the day, the Supreme Court at that point in time, there were 8 justices. Kennedy had not been confirmed. And so 6 of the justices agreed with me. Entrapment should have gone to the jury, and the decision was written by Chief Justice Rehnquist. And so I got 1,000% in the Supreme Court. That's pretty darn good. I don't think I'll get back there, but it was a very interesting experience.
Well, Frank, I could go on talking to you like this all night, and I wish we had time to do it, but in a few minutes there are going to be a lot of friends of yours downstairs who are going to want you to spend time with them and not with me. And I'm not going to put myself in a position of preventing them from doing it. You've led a remarkable life. I think remarkable not only for your success in your profession, but your willingness to give so much of yourself to the Milwaukee community, and just how much Milwaukee has benefited from those efforts. I think it's great that Pi Lambda Phi has been so helpful to you in doing that, both by providing the relationships that have given a foundation to your life, and also the values and the experiences that you've been able to build on in doing those things. We're going to talk a lot more about you this evening, and I'm looking forward to hearing it. We're going to talk a little bit about the foundation and how we're trying to assure that young Pi Lambs today and for a long time to come are going to be able to benefit from the same opportunities that you have. I'll be one of those speakers tonight, although I'll try to be a lot more brief than I have been now. So for the moment, let me just say thank you so much for everything you've done for the legal profession, for your clients, for Milwaukee. Everything that you've done to bring honor to Pi Lambda Phi, and for taking the time to share it with us this afternoon. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Roger. And I got to tell you, you came prepared, because you knew more about my life than you probably read in the bio. And I compliment you, and it's been a win-win situation. I'm very honored by the award, and I'm happy to be involved in a situation where I might encourage people to adjust their course and help themselves and the community at the same time.
Thank you, Frank.
Great.